A screenshot from a group chat where the woman I had devoted myself to for the past year told her friends I was too clingy and always hovering. The same woman who called me 3 times a day, who texted constantly asking where I was, who insisted I spend every weekend at her place. I stared at those words for a full minute. My chest tightened as I scrolled through more messages. Her friends laughed. One suggested she should train me better. Another said she should be grateful to have someone so attentive. Her response, "Sometimes I just need space from him. He's exhausting. Exhausting." After I'd driven across town at midnight last week because she felt lonely. After I'd rearranged my work schedule to accommodate her family visits. After I'd become the emotional support she claimed she couldn't live without. The messages were accidentally sent by her friend, who thought I was already aware of these conversations. The betrayal cut deep, not just because of what she said, but because of the sheer hypocrisy of it all. When I confronted her that evening, she was defensive. "It was just girl talk," she said dismissively. "You wouldn't understand." When I pointed out how she was the one who demanded my constant attention, she twisted it around. "See, this reaction is exactly why I need to vent sometimes." That moment crystallized everything. I wasn't going to argue or beg her to see my perspective. Instead, I nodded calmly, which clearly threw her off. She expected a fight, tears, or desperate reassurances. That's when I decided she would learn exactly what my absence felt like. The next morning, I didn't send my usual wake-up text. When she called, I let it go to voicemail, responding hours later with a brief busy day. Talk later. Her confusion was evident in the flurry of messages that followed. "Are you mad? What's going on?" I simply replied, "Just giving you the space you mentioned wanting." I declined weekend plans, citing work commitments. When she showed up unannounced at my apartment, I was polite but distant. "I have plans to go to the gym." "No, I can't cancel them. No, I won't be free later either." "What's happened to you?" she demanded, tears welling in her eyes. "Nothing's happened," I replied evenly. "I'm just no longer being the clingy boyfriend you complained about. Isn't this what you wanted? More space?" The color drained from her face as she realized I knew exactly what she'd been saying behind my back. "Those messages were private," she stammered. "You weren't supposed to see them." "Clearly," I said. "But now that I have, I'm making changes that benefit us both. You get your space, and I get my self-respect back." As she left my apartment that day, the power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. For the first time, she was the one looking back, uncertain and afraid of losing something she hadn't valued until it was slipping away, and I felt a strength I hadn't realized was missing. The power of choosing myself first. The next week was a master class in reclaiming my independence. I immersed myself in projects that had been neglected while I catered to her every need. My phone buzzed constantly with her messages, each one increasingly urgent. But I responded at my convenience, brief, cordial, but definitively distant. When she called on Tuesday evening, I answered with a neutral tone. "Hey, I'm at the gym. Can we talk tomorrow?" Before she could protest, I added, "I've got a training session starting in 2 minutes," and ended the call. No prolonged explanations, no apologies. That night, my phone lit up with a barrage of texts. "Are you still upset about what I said to my friends? You're acting so different. I miss you. Can you please come over tonight?" The old me would have rushed to her side, desperate to resolve the tension. Instead, I replied the next morning, "Can't tonight. Catching up with colleagues, after work." It wasn't a lie. I had indeed made plans with Kyo workers I'd neglected in favor of her company. The shift in our dynamic was palpable. She started showing up at places she knew I frequented, my favorite coffee shop, the gym during my usual hours. When we did cross paths, she was overly affectionate, touching my arm, leaning in close when speaking, behaviors that used to be my default, not hers. During a dinner she insisted on, she reached across the table and took my hand. "You've been so busy lately," she said, a question embedded in her statement. "I've been refocusing on some priorities," I replied evenly, not pulling away but not returning the gesture either. "What priorities exactly?" There was an edge to her voice now. "My career, my fitness goals, reconnecting with friends." I took a sip of water. "Things I let slide recently." Her expression darkened. "So I'm not a priority anymore?" This was the moment she expected me to backpedal and reassure her. Instead, I met her gaze directly. "You made it clear to your friends that my attention was suffocating. I'm respecting what you said you wanted." "That's not fair," she protested. "Those were private conversations. I didn't mean..." You didn't mean for me to find out, I interrupted calmly. That's different from not meaning what you said. She tried a different approach, her voice softening. I miss how things were. You're acting like a completely different person. I'm actually feeling more like myself than I have in months, I replied honestly. And I'm not acting differently with everyone. Just with you. That statement hung between us, as her face flushed with the realization that her words had consequences beyond venting to friends. For the first time, she was experiencing what it felt like to be the one seeking attention rather than deflecting it. Later that week, I declined another invitation to stay over at her place. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Better sleep at my place. A simple boundary stated without defensive justification. Since when do you care about early meetings? She snapped, frustration breaking through. You used to drive back home at 5 a.m. just to have your work close. That wasn't sustainable, I replied, or healthy. Her voice cracked slightly. Are you breaking up with me? No, I said truthfully. I'm just no longer being someone I don't recognize to keep you happy. As I drove home alone that night, I felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. My phone buzzed repeatedly with her messages, but there was no anxiety, no compulsion to respond immediately. The freedom was intoxicating, not freedom from her, but from the version of myself that had placed her approval above my self-respect. 3 weeks into my transformation, a confrontation I'd been expecting finally arrived. I was working late at the office when she stormed in, eyes red and voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. We need to talk, she declared, standing in front of my desk with arms crossed. You can't keep avoiding me like this. I finished typing my email before looking up. I'm not avoiding you. I've just been busy for 3 weeks. You barely respond to my texts anymore. You always have some excuse not to see me. What happened to the man who couldn't go a day without seeing me? I leaned back in my chair. He discovered that man was labeled clingy and exhausting behind his back. Her face flushed. Are you ever going to let that go? It was just stupid venting. Everyone complains about their partner sometimes. I never complained about you, I said calmly. Not once. This seemed to catch her off guard. Well, maybe you should have. Maybe. I stood up, gathering my laptop. I need to lock up here. Do you want to continue this conversation elsewhere? We walked to a nearby cafe in tense silence. Once seated, she reached for my hand across the table. This time I gently moved it away. The hurt in her eyes was immediate, but I maintained my composure. I miss us, she said quietly. I miss how you used to look at me, how you always wanted to be around me. You mean how I was too clingy? Her eyes flashed with frustration. Stop throwing that in my face. It was one comment. Actually, I replied, I saw the entire conversation thread. It wasn't just one comment, and it wasn't just to your friends. You mocked me in that group chat for weeks. The guy who was too available, needed training, who couldn't take a hint. The same guy who rearranged his entire life to be there whenever you called. She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I didn't mean those things. Yes, you did. The problem isn't that you said them. The problem is you said them while simultaneously demanding that exact behavior from me. I kept my voice level. Do you know what that's called? Hypocrisy. Tears welled in her eyes. So this coldness, this distance, it's punishment. No, it's self-respect. And it's interesting that you perceive basic boundaries as coldness. That says more about your expectations than my behavior. Our conversation was interrupted when 2 of her friends walked into the cafe. They spotted us immediately and approached our table with curious expressions, the same women who had participated in mocking me in the group chat. Hey, one of them greeted, eyes darting between us, clearly sensing the tension. We didn't expect to see you 2 here. I stood and offered them my seat, using the opportunity to end the confrontation. I was just leaving, actually, work deadlines. I nodded politely to both of them, then turned to her. I'll call you tomorrow. As I walked away, I heard one friend whisper, not quite quietly enough, he seems different. What happened to the puppy dog who followed you everywhere? I stepped outside, breathing in the cool evening air. My phone buzzed with a text from her, please don't leave like this. We're not finished talking. I replied simply, I am for tonight. Respect my space. The word she had used on me countless times before. Later that evening, one of her friends, the one who had accidentally sent me the screenshots, messaged me directly. You've changed in a good way. She doesn't know what to do with this new version of you. I didn't respond. This wasn't about gaining approval from her social circle or playing games. This was about reclaiming my dignity. Still, it was telling that the very people who had laughed at my devotion were now intrigued by my independence. That night, she called 6 times. I silenced my phone and went to sleep, no longer feeling that gnawing anxiety about making her wait. The man who had been dismissed as clingy was gone. In his place stood someone who valued himself enough to walk away from a table where he wasn't respected. The invitation sat in my inbox for 3 days before I decided to accept it. A housewarming party hosted by one of her closest friends, the same friends who had been privy to her complaints about me. Under normal circumstances, I would have immediately confirmed attendance, eager to please her and remain in her good graces. But things had changed. I texted her a simple message. I'll be attending the housewarming on Saturday, driving separately, meeting with a client nearby earlier. Her response was immediate. We could go together after your meeting. No need. Might stay late catching up with some people I haven't seen in a while. When Saturday arrived, I deliberately timed my entrance 30 minutes after she had already arrived, based on her social media updates. I wore a navy suit jacket I'd recently purchased but hadn't shown her, paired with a confident demeanor that felt increasingly natural rather than forced. The moment I walked in, I felt eyes turn toward me. She was mid-conversation across the room but immediately locked eyes with me, clearly surprised that I had actually shown up. Rather than making a beeline for her as I would have done before, I greeted our host with a bottle of whiskey I knew he appreciated, then made my way to a group that included several people I genuinely enjoyed talking to. For the next hour, I circulated through the party, engaging in conversations about everything from career developments to travel plans. I laughed genuinely, spoke with conviction about my recent professional achievements, and deliberately avoided checking where she was or who she was speaking with. Eventually, she approached, slipping her arm through mine possessively. "There you are. I was wondering when you'd come say hello." "I was getting around to it," I replied, with a relaxed smile that conveyed I was in no hurry. Then, turning to include the others in our conversation, I continued the discussion about an upcoming industry conference without missing a beat. Her grip on my arm tightened slightly. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked, her voice sweet but her eyes communicating urgency. In the kitchen, away from the crowd, her demeanor changed instantly. "What are you doing?" "Having conversations at a party," I replied simply. "What does it look like I'm doing?" "You've barely acknowledged me since you arrived." "I acknowledged you just now." She stepped closer. "You know what I mean. You've been working the room like you're networking at a business event." "I'm catching up with people I haven't properly talked to in months," I said honestly, because I was always too busy making sure you were comfortable, happy, entertained. "So this is more punishment." I shook my head. "This is me enjoying a social gathering without making you the center of my universe. There's a difference." Our conversation was interrupted when one of her friends, the one who had called me a puppy dog at the cafe, entered the kitchen. She stopped short, clearly surprised to find us in what appeared to be a tense discussion. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "You're not interrupting anything," I assured her with a genuine smile. "I was just about to grab another drink. Can I get either of you anything?" The friend accepted my offer while she declined with a tight smile. As I prepared the drink, the friend commented, "I barely recognized you when you walked in tonight. You seem different." "Just getting back to myself," I replied. When I handed her the drink, she maintained eye contact a beat longer than necessary. "It suits you." I rejoined the main party, leaving the two of them in the kitchen. Throughout the evening, I noticed she watched me constantly, particularly when I was engaged in animated conversation with others. Twice, she tried to reclaim my attention by bringing up inside jokes or memories in group settings, clearly expecting me to follow her conversational lead as I always had before. Instead, I acknowledged them briefly before returning to the broader discussion. The subtle power struggle was evident to anyone paying attention, and several people were. Near the end of the night, our host raised a toast to new beginnings in his new home. As glasses clinked, she appeared at my side again, whispering, "Can I get a ride home with you?" "I thought you came with your roommate," I replied, having noticed her arrival earlier. "She left already." "Please, we hardly talked tonight." The old me would have jumped at this opportunity for private time with her. The new me recognized it for what it was, an attempt to re-establish the dynamic where her needs automatically trumped my plans. "I'm actually heading in the opposite direction after this. Meeting some colleagues for a nightcap." It wasn't a lie. I had indeed made alternative plans, something I never would have done before when attending events with her. The flash of shock and hurt in her eyes was unmistakable. For perhaps the first time, she was experiencing what it felt like to be an option rather than a priority. Exactly what I'd been to her, despite her demands for constant attention. As I said my goodbyes to the host and other guests, I caught snippets of conversation. They seemed different together. He's definitely not following her around anymore. She looks lost. Walking to my car alone that night, my phone lit up with her message. "This isn't fair. You're deliberately trying to make me jealous." I replied with perfect clarity. "I'm not trying to make you anything. I'm simply no longer pretending to be someone I'm not. The irony is you're now seeking the very attention you mocked me for giving." A week after the housewarming party, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. When I opened the door, she stood there with puffy eyes and a determined expression. The time for games had apparently passed. "We need to talk," she said, not asking permission to enter but waiting for my response nonetheless. A subtle shift from how she would have previously barged in, claiming my space as her own. "I'm in the middle of something," I replied calmly. It was true. I'd been reviewing contracts for a major project. "Can we do this tomorrow?" "No," she said firmly. "I've waited long enough." I stepped aside to let her in, noting how she scanned my apartment with careful eyes. The place was immaculate, another change from when I dropped everything at her beck and call. On my coffee table sat business books I'd been meaning to read for months. My laptop was open to spreadsheets rather than the streaming shows we used to watch together. "You've redecorated," she observed, noticing the new artwork on my walls. Pieces I'd purchased on a weekend trip with friends that I hadn't told her about. "Just making the space more mine," I replied, offering her a drink, which she declined. She sat on the edge of my couch, back straight, hands folded in her lap. This wasn't the casual sprawl of someone who once treated my apartment as an extension of her own. This was the posture of a visitor, uncertain of her welcome. "I miss you," she began, her voice cracking slightly. "The real you, not this cold, distant person you've become." "This is the real me," I corrected her. "The person you knew was someone I created because I thought that's what you wanted. Someone always available, always agreeable, always putting your needs first." "And what was wrong with that?" she asked, a hint of frustration breaking through. "Nothing. Except you didn't actually want that person. You wanted his availability but mocked his devotion. You wanted his support but called it clinginess behind his back." She looked down at her hands. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I was wrong. What I said to my friends was stupid and hurtful and untrue. But you still said it. People say things they don't mean all the time," she protested. "Haven't you ever complained about someone you care about?" "Not like that," I said firmly. "Not in a way that fundamentally disrespected who they were. And certainly not while simultaneously demanding they continue the very behaviors I was mocking." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. What can I do to fix this, to get us back to how we were?" I studied her face for a moment. The desperation seemed genuine, but something else was evident too. She wasn't just missing me. She was missing the security of knowing someone was completely devoted to her regardless of how she behaved. "We can't go back," I said finally. "That version of me is gone and he's not coming back." "Then who is this?" She gestured at me. "This cold, calculating person who measures out his time and attention like it's some precious commodity?" "Someone who values himself," I replied evenly. "Someone who realized that love shouldn't require self-erasure." She moved closer on the couch, reaching for my hand. This time I didn't pull away, but I didn't respond to the touch either. "I love you," she said, her voice breaking. "I took you for granted, and I'm sorry. Please give me another chance to appreciate you properly." For a brief moment I felt the pull of our history, the comfortable familiarity of being the person she needed. But then I remembered the screenshots, the laughter at my expense, the fundamental disrespect beneath her demands for attention. "Here's what I can offer," I said carefully. "We can continue seeing each other but with clear boundaries. I won't drop everything when you call. I won't be available at your convenience. I have a life, priorities and self-respect that won't be compromised anymore." Her face fell. "So that's it? Take it or leave it." "It's not an ultimatum. It's a boundary. There's a difference." She stood abruptly, anger replacing vulnerability. "You're punishing me. You're deliberately withholding to make me suffer." I remained seated, maintaining my composure. "I'm not withholding anything. I'm simply no longer overextending. There's a difference between giving freely and giving at your own expense. I did the latter for too long. So all those times you said you loved me, that you'd do anything for me, that was conditional?" No, I replied. My love wasn't conditional, but my self-respect is non-negotiable. You can't claim to love someone while systematically undermining them behind their back. She paced my living room, frustration evident in every movement. So what happens now? We just start over, pretend the past year didn't happen. We can't start over, but we can move forward differently if that's what you want, with mutual respect as the foundation. Her tears had stopped now, replaced by a calculated assessment. And if I decide that's not enough for me? I met her gaze steadily. Then we both move on separately. The ultimatum I'd been expecting from her never came. Instead, she gathered her purse with deliberate movements. I need to think. This isn't the conversation I expected to have. Take all the time you need, I said, standing to walk her to the door. I'm not going anywhere. As she left, there was no desperate kiss, no emotional plea, no dramatic declaration. Just the quiet closing of a door and the realization that whatever happened next would be on entirely new terms. Terms that included my dignity as a non-negotiable element. 2 months passed after our confrontation in my apartment. 2 months of limited contact, brief text exchanges, and a remarkable absence of the emotional manipulation that had characterized our relationship before. In that time, I flourished. My career accelerated as I channeled energy into projects, rather than constantly managing her emotions. My social circle expanded beyond the narrow confines she had tacitly enforced. Most importantly, I rediscovered aspects of myself that had been submerged beneath the weight of always being available, always being amenable. We met occasionally during those months, coffee once, dinner twice. Each interaction carried the polite distance of former intimates finding a new equilibrium. She watched me carefully during these meetings, searching for cracks in my resolve, moments of weakness where the old pattern might reassert itself. She found none. It was during our third meeting at a restaurant we used to frequent that she finally laid her cards on the table. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, setting down her glass with deliberate precision, about boundaries and self-respect. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. I didn't realize how much I'd come to rely on your availability. She chose her words carefully. It was easier to blame you for being too present than to acknowledge how much I needed that presence. That's an honest assessment, I replied, genuinely appreciating her insight. She leaned forward. I want to try again, with the new terms, the new boundaries, whatever you need. Looking at her across the table, I recognized the sincerity in her offer. 2 months ago, it might have been enough, but something fundamental had shifted within me, not just toward her, but in how I valued myself. I appreciate that, I said, measuring my words, but I've done some thinking too. What happened between us wasn't just about boundaries, it was about basic respect. Her face fell slightly. I've apologized for those messages. This isn't about the messages anymore, I explained. It's about realizing that I want a relationship built on mutual admiration, not one where either person feels the need to tear the other down behind their back. I would never do that again, she insisted. Maybe not, but the fact that it happened at all revealed something important. You didn't respect who I was. You wanted the benefits of my devotion while simultaneously resenting me for giving it. She was quiet for a long moment. So, there's no chance for us? Even with everything I've learned? I considered her question seriously, owing her that much honesty. I think we both learned valuable lessons. I learned about maintaining healthy boundaries. You learned not to take devotion for granted. But I don't think we're meant to apply those lessons with each other. She blinked back tears but nodded with remarkable composure. I was afraid you'd say that. It's not about punishment, I assured her. It's about growth. Sometimes growth means moving in different directions. We finished our meal with surprisingly genuine conversation about our respective lives. For the first time, I felt no undercurrent of emotional manipulation, no subtle tugs toward the dynamic we once had. When we parted outside the restaurant, her hug was brief but sincere. For what it's worth, she said, I miss the man I took for granted, not because of what he did for me, but because of who he was. He's still here, I replied with a small smile, just with better boundaries. 3 weeks later, one of her friends, ironically the same one who had accidentally sent me the screenshots that started it all, reached out to let me know she had begun seeing someone new. It was clearly meant to provoke jealousy or regret. Instead, I felt a surprising sense of closure. That evening, I received a text from her. I hope you're doing well. I sometimes miss what we had. My response was neither cruel nor overly kind. I hope you're finding what you need. I'm grateful for the lessons, even the difficult ones. She replied almost immediately, Will you ever forgive me? This question gave me pause. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. That had come weeks ago when I realized how necessary our unraveling had been for my growth. I already have, I wrote back honestly. But forgiving doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes it just means being able to move forward without resentment. Her final message was simple. You deserved better than who I was then. We both deserved better, I replied. And now we have the chance to find it. As I set down my phone that night, I realized the transformation was complete. The man who had been dismissed as clingy had become someone who understood his worth, wasn't determined by another's validation. The painful revelation of her mockery had ultimately freed me to reclaim myself. In the months that followed, I approached new relationships with clear boundaries and uncompromising self-respect. I remained capable of devotion, but never again at the expense of my dignity. The painful lesson had been worth the price. What others take for granted, they don't truly value. And what we allow in relationships sets the standard for how we'll be treated. Sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect isn't confrontation or retaliation. It's simply removing yourself from the equation and allowing the other person to experience the absence of what they failed to appreciate when it was freely given. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.